to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast. Each week, we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration, and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years.
Hello, my name is Ruth Lue-Quee, your host for this week's TTS Talking Early Years podcast. I'm an educational consultant, also known as My Mummy Teacher, founder of MMT Play, and passionate about play and inclusion. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at supporting SEN in the early years, inspiring you with guidance and resources to enhance your practice. I'm delighted to introduce Helen Battelley as today's guest. Welcome to the podcast, Helen. How are you today?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you for having me here.
Hello, Mike. Before we get started, could you please give us a quick introduction about yourself for our listeners?
Hi, yes, I'm an early childhood physical development, physical activity and movement play specialist. I'm a lecturer, author, trainer and consultant, and I'm very passionate about this field. And I also chair the National Early Years Active Start Partnership.
Amazing. And we had some really good key takeaways from our last episode. So I'm super excited to dive straight into this one. We're going to be having a look at the role of educators in enabling or constricting a child's development, and looking at, are you an enabler or are you a constrictor? And obviously within the early years, and I would say past the early years, I would say right up to further education, we want to be enablers. We want to be encouraging movement as much as we possibly can. But having a little think about within early years specifically, that role of our practitioner or our educator, and however you want to sort of refer to yourself, how can their behaviours or attitudes support or hinder a child's development? Hello, Mike.
Well, as we know, children act out and they play the scenarios that happen in their everyday lives, and they are observing us. They are mirroring us. They are modelling us, everything that we do. So we need to be very conscious of that. We need to be conscious of the messages. There's those subliminal messages that we are transferring to the children. For example, I went to a setting last year, and there was a lady who she was an older lady, and she struggled to get up and down off the floor, and she would lean forward, place her hands down, and there'd be a little bit of groaning as she would get up to her feet. And a couple of the children were replicating that, which was hilarious to see. But actually, what we can see there is the depth of how they model and mirror our behaviours. So we need to be very conscious of that. We need to be conscious about the role that physical activity and movement plays within our lives as well, and thinking about how that can impact on our practice and our provision. So it's important to think about going back to your childhood. So when I work with educators, I always say, let's go back to your childhood. What did you enjoy? What did you love doing as a young child? Did you play out in the community? Did you play elastics? Did you play Kirby? Did you play with Cat's Cradle? What kind did you have? Fortune tellers? What kind of things did you do? And then we start this fabulous discussion of talking about play, and you see educators' faces light up. And then we have to think about the children in our care now, and actually let's think, do they have those same opportunities that we had within our communities that they have? And actually, no, they don't. We see that the last time a large-scale study was delivered was back in 2018, and that study identified that 91% of children aged 2 to 4 were not reaching the current recommended levels of physical activity. So we are in a real terrible situation when it comes to PD. And in 2018, that was before COVID, and we know that subsequently post-COVID that actually physical activity levels declined. So we do need to make sure that we have, I always say, our physical development goggles on. We need to make sure we're looking through the lens of physical development. If you were to walk into your setting, what does it say to you? Is it a calm, sedentary space? Which is great. We want children to feel nurtured and calm, but actually they don't need to be sitting down to feel nurtured and calm. They can feel nurtured and more emotionally secure if they're feeling physically secure. So going back to our retained reflexes, are we thinking about the spinal gallons, thinking about their bladder control? Are we thinking about all of those primitive reflexes where we can help support their emotional security through that? So just using those physical development goggles can really help influence your practice and your provision.
Now, I really like that sort of that point that you've made about using your physical development goggles to see it through a different lens, really, because I think sometimes we can have so many priorities in our heads that we're trying to do on a day-to-day basis that we don't always step back and look enough and think, how can we get more physical opportunities within this? And it can be across our entire curriculum. We can weave it and thread it, and actually it underpins everything we do, doesn't it? That physical development, that movement, whether it's our growth movement, whether it's our fine motor skills. Like, children can't learn to write until they've really mastered those gross motor skills, and they need those before they need the fine motor skills. So really offering lots of opportunities to move and be as physical as they can. And I also thought it was really key as well what you spoke about, children nowadays, they absolutely don't get the free play that we had when we were children. And there's a lot of things that children learn within that, even things like risk, taking a risk. How high can I jump? Can I give myself a go? And I know what you mentioned on a previous episode as well about anxiety and social and emotional development being linked to their reflexes too. So it all kind of links. So they're taking less risks because they've got more anxiety, because they're not moving as much. It's one thing that sort of it's like a circle, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely. And I understand the pressures that educators are under. And I understand we're living in a compensation nation where actually a lot of educators are fearful of engaging children in risky play. I was working delivering a project in Birmingham, and a lot of the educators that I was working with said that they've removed the monkey bars. Some of the climbing frames had to be removed because children fell off and hurt themselves. And so we have to think about what does a healthy childhood look like? What is physical well-being? What does that look like? And it's a child who is confident, competent, happy to go and explore their own physicality, that they've developed confidence in those skills, that they take risks in their physical activity behaviours, that they're showing efficacy within those certain motor skills. So we need to be thinking about that. And actually, if as educators we're struggling to offer risk and certain types of physical play, we need to change that. And one of the best ways we can do that is we can think about embedding a policy within our practice. So one of the key suggestions that I say to educators is to write a physical activity policy where you're going to be getting children to explore swinging, spinning, rolling, climbing, sliding, jumping, hanging, dangling, all of these really important fundamental movement behaviours. But we're going to show parents this physical activity. Everybody's going to sign it. Everybody knows what's going to be happening. And actually that way you're covered. You're covered as an educator, and the parents know what's going to be involved within your provision, that actually physical activity is going to play a key role because it will impact on all those other areas of learning and development.
And one of the biggest things as well is their social and emotional development. Like we've touched upon, we need our children to be physically active, to be happy, to be healthy. There's all the science between that. Even as adults, we know the more we move, the better that we feel. And we need to model that to our children. And I think, it's even little things like just the comments that we can sometimes make as an adult. Like, oh no, it's raining again, I'm not going to go outside. Just thinking before we say that and be like, it's raining, but we could just put our coats on and go and run around anyway. It's really fun to run and splash in the puddles, isn't it? And just that little mindset shift has a big impact on the attitude that our children are going to have. Because I've heard children say, oh, no, it's raining again, we can't go out. And we want to have it as a positive, like, it might be raining, but if we dress appropriately, we can go and have just as much fun being active.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, we need to be nudging those children into those behaviours. We're seeing a lot of children who aren't actively choosing those behaviours. So we need to be thinking about setting up that environment. maybe, for example, you have a class of 20 children and you might have 15 that like going outside. As soon as the doors are open, out they go and they start running, going on the bikes, scooters, etc. But you might have 5 who will prefer during free flow provision to stay inside playing with the small world. Now, it's really important we get those children outside. We get them involved in that. So maybe what we can start doing is just immediately move that table outside, move that table to a different space. Maybe we can take what's on the table and we can put it on top of the climbing frame. Maybe we can take those small world toys and take them to a park if we're a childminder using a different space. We just need to be a little bit more creative within introducing more outdoor play and physical play in a developmentally appropriate way.
And that leads on nicely really to thinking about the environment set up on the whole and how, again, our physical environment can limit or enhance our movement. And this is something, so my little boy just started reception this week, so he's just gone into early years in a school setting, and he had his first piece of homework, and it was to draw a picture of his favourite thing from school. And me being me, I was like, right, we're going to go outside. We stuck it on the little easel outdoors, and I didn't even tell him it was homework because that goes against my grain in my core. But I just said to him, can you draw Mummy a picture of what you did at school this week? But he was outside, he was up, he was doing it on a vertical surface, and I just took a photo of that and stuck it in his book, rather than being inside, sitting at a desk, holding his pencil, doing it that way. I just wanted him to have that enjoyment, to see it as fun, to see it as play, to see it as something that he was getting active with. And his little sister copied him, so she went and joined in on the other side. And again, it was something that actually I could have set that up in the kitchen, and there wouldn't really have been any movement. In fact, I would have been struggling to keep him sat on his seat, to be perfectly honest, to sit and do it. Or I could take it outside. He got to run around, so he kept coming back to it, doing it a few different times. He enjoyed it. It was fun, and he was moving. So what are the sorts of things that practitioners can do to improve their environment so it allows for the movement?
Well, first of all, think about your language. As educators, just think about our language as well as the environment. So are you frequently saying, stop fidgeting, sit still, no running in the corridor, no running outside? Think about that language and actually, what does that mean? And how is that going to impact children? We know that children can only be still if they have developed their vestibular and proprioceptive systems. And the only way to do that is through movement behaviours. So being still is one of the most complex things that you can ask of a young child. So let's give them a plethora of movement experiences throughout the day. So one way to do that is to remove the chairs from our settings. Children only need chairs for meal times. They do not need chairs to play at a tough tray. They do not need chairs for mark making. They do not need chairs for Play-Doh. So let's remove those chairs. And I've done this experiment in quite a few settings, both in Key Stage 1, in reception, and in younger. And all educators have seen a huge change in movement behaviours, but not just from the children, but actually from the educators as well. So it has really impacted on behaviour and learning, which is great. Also making a point to be outside as much as possible. So taking that learning outside, thinking about whether you can just change and adapt that. Maybe you've got your directed learning activity, but let's do it outside. Let's all sit on logs, or let's just lay down on our tummies and talk to each other in a circle that way. It doesn't need to be so structured within that sedentary learning. So we need to make sure that we've got those bodies moving as much as possible. And I would urge as well to think about those movement vocabulary types. So I spoke about them earlier. Swinging, spinning, climbing, jumping, rolling, twisting, turning, dangling, hanging. Make sure we use those words and make sure our environment allows those words. I went into a setting just recently where they had used one of the baby hammocks that you wrap around your body, the baby carrier hammocks, and they'd made it into a kind of a hanging seat in the classroom. So it was bolted with 2 metal bolts, and it was just a piece of fabric. And when I went in, there were 4 children who were straddled this long, this piece of fabric, and they were rocking like a rocking chair. Then they were swinging from side to side. And so right there, I saw the vestibular and the proprioceptive sense being developed. And there was so much laughter and language developing as well. So again, social, emotional communication and language. So yeah, think about the movement vocabulary. How can you adapt your environment to support all of those movement types?
No, I think that's a really nice thing to take away. Thinking about that movement vocabulary, trying to interact. You can almost, within your setting or with practitioners, you could sort of play a little game to test yourselves. How many times a day can we get this word in? Can we get that word in? And to make it fun for you as much as it is for the children, because the more you are consciously thinking about it, the more it will naturally happen. Like we were saying previously about looking through the lens of physical development. And I think, again, a really valuable takeaway is to remove those chairs. Like we do not need those chairs. And straight away, we're going to have more movement. We're going to enable children to rest how they want to rest, to stand how they want to stand, to sit how they want to sit, to lie on their tummies and to be in that position, which is going to be brilliant that's what's right for that child in that moment. And that's ultimately how their development across the board is going to flourish when we're meeting them where they're at, and enabling to do those sorts of things.
Yes, just to think about the way the muscles develop. So their muscles develop in what's called the snowflake effect, so from inside out and top down. So just be conscious of that. Think about those those muscles developing, especially when we're thinking about fine motor control. So, for example, I was delivering a session on Jack and the Beanstalk. Rather than reading the story, we acted it out. We went outside, and then the children all had a piece of chalk. This was with a nursery and reception mixed class, and I got the children to draw their beanstalk across the playground. And I said, how tall and how long is your beanstalk? So they drew it. And I said, okay, let's see if we can walk along the beanstalk. Let's twist, let's balance, let's turn, let's add some curly whirly loops. And it was a lovely way to think about balance, coordination, control, thinking about that gross motor leading to the fine motor. So yeah, just be conscious and use those goggles to think about how you can change things and adapt that to support the movement pedagogy wherever possible.
No, Mike's been amazing. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our guest Helen for joining us and providing such a valuable insight. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Ruth Lue-Quee, and Helen Battelley. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your settings and links to relevant resources.